Chosen ones. The proven ways to know you're a first-round divine pick. Have you ever felt like you didn't quite fit into the mold society gave you? Like you were born with a frequency just slightly off from everyone else's channel? You walk into a room and sense things others don't. You feel the energy before anyone speaks. People come to you with their pain, their secrets, their silent hopes. You feel a strange weight in your heart, sometimes a heaviness that has nothing to do with your external life, but everything to do with something ancient inside of you. If you felt this, it's not insanity. It's initiation. You are not random. You are not overlooked. You are not broken. You are a first-round divine pick. And in this life, you are waking up to that mission. The truth is, the chosen ones are not picked because of their perfection. They're picked because of their capacity. The capacity to carry light in dark places. The capacity to hold space when others collapse. The capacity to feel, deeply and often painfully, what others ignore. But here's what most people don't understand. Being chosen doesn't mean being better. It means being responsible for something sacred. A vibration. A truth. A code that's ancient, encrypted deep within your DNA. You didn't come here to chase trends. You came to remember who you were before the world told you who to be.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
So how do you know you're a divine first-round pick? It's not what the world would think. It's not about having special powers or glowing auras or being born into a lineage of mystics. It starts with pain. Yes, pain, because when you're chosen, your soul signs up for intensity. You will experience rejection not as failure but as redirection. You'll lose people not because you're unlovable, but because their energy was never meant to be in your next chapter. The universe begins to strip away everything that isn't aligned with your assignment. And it hurts. It's confusing, but it's holy. You'll often feel isolated even when you're surrounded by people. There's a part of you that no one seems to fully understand, and no matter how much you explain it, it stays untouched. That's sacred silence inside of you. That's the divine code. That's the mark. That's how you know. Because the chosen ones walk alone before they walk in purpose. The solitude isn't punishment, it's preparation. In your loneliness, you're being taught how to hear the whispers of the universe. You're being trained to trust your own inner compass when all the external maps fail. But let me tell you something raw and real. The world will not validate you early. It won't clap for you when you're being torn apart in silence. It won't understand why you walk away from opportunities that look perfect on paper. But that's because you see something they don't. You feel something deeper. You know when energy is contaminated. You know when something's off. And that's another sign you can't tolerate the fake. You can't fake smile. You can't force conversations. You can't stay in environments that drain your soul. That doesn't make you difficult. That makes you aware. You were born to protect your frequency because your frequency is your assignment. There's a moment in every chosen one's journey when they realize they don't want what everyone else wants. Fame? Maybe, but only if it serves the mission. Money? Sure, but not at the cost of integrity. Love? Absolutely. But only if it respects your soul. You begin to realize that you're not here to consume the world. You're here to heal it, and that shift changes everything. You stop chasing and start magnetizing. You stop proving and start embodying. You stop doubting and start knowing. This knowing is not loud. It's quiet, but it's unshakable. You walk into rooms differently. You speak less, but when you do, people listen. Not because you're trying to impress, but because your words carry weight. That's what happens when you've been through the fire and didn't come out bitter. That's what happens when you've died 1,000 spiritual deaths and still have love in your heart. You become a frequency, a walking permission slip for others to wake up. But here's the twist. Your life will often look messy before it looks miraculous. The chosen ones go through what I call divine distortion. Nothing makes sense. Things fall apart right when you think you're about to rise. You lose people, jobs, identities. You question your sanity. But it's not chaos, it's calibration. The universe is rearranging you, tearing down your false self, rewiring your nervous system to hold more light. Because when the time comes, and it will, you'll be required to carry something powerful. Something that changes others with just your presence. Ask yourself this. Have you ever felt like you were being prepared for something, even though you didn't know what it was? That feeling is not delusion. It's divine memory. Your soul remembers being chosen. Your ego just forgot. That's why the journey feels like remembering more than learning. That's why you resonate with ancient truths. That's why you get chills when you hear certain words or enter sacred spaces. You're not just waking up, you're returning. And when you return, you'll find that everything you need is already within you. The guidance, it was always in your gut. The wisdom, it was hidden behind your pain. The power, it was quietly waiting beneath your fear. You're not becoming chosen. You're remembering that you already were. So don't ask if you're worthy. Ask if you're willing. Willing to walk the lonely path. Willing to lose what's not aligned. Willing to sit in the fire without running. Because if you are, then yes, you're a first-round divine pick. And if you've made it this far, I already know. The sacred struggles, why your pain was proof of your divine draft. There's something most people never understand about chosen ones. They think being chosen means having an easy path, a gifted life, a clear calling. But in truth, it's almost always the opposite. You don't wake up one day with a golden ticket and a voice from the sky announcing your divinity. Instead, you wake up in chaos, in trauma, in confusion. You wake up in a body that carries wounds, in a life that feels out of sync, in a family that may not see you. And all of that, it's intentional, because one of the most undeniable signs of being a first-round divine pick is this: your struggles weren't random. They were sacred. See, the universe doesn't waste pain. It transforms it. It refines it. It translates it into power. That's why your suffering was never a punishment, it was proof. Proof that your soul signed a divine contract before you even got here. And the fine print of that contract reads, I agree to forget myself, to walk through fire, to be broken open so that I may carry light back into the world. That's the path of the chosen, not glamour, not ease, but anointing through adversity. You may have grown up in dysfunction. You might have been the black sheep, the one who questioned everything, the one who felt too much, cried too easily, sensed every unspoken tension in the room. That's not weakness. That's wiring. Your sensitivity was never a flaw. It was a signal that your spirit was tuned into a different frequency. You were born with antennas most people don't have. You saw the truth under the surface. You felt the pain behind the smiles. You couldn't play the game because you saw the game. And when you see the truth, you can't unsee it. That's the burden of being chosen. But the beauty of it, that pain carved space inside you that nothing else could. It created a depth that can't be taught. You became a home for wisdom, not because you studied it, but because you lived it. You became a mirror for others, not because you wanted to, but because the universe made you see yourself so clearly that others can't help but see themselves in your reflection. You became a healer, not because you were whole, but because you learned to walk with your wounds open and still love. And here's something wild to consider. What if the people who hurt you were part of your divine training? What if the betrayal, the abandonment, the heartbreaks were all part of the curriculum? Not to break you, but to break you open, to reveal what was hidden inside you all along. To remove the distractions, the illusions, the masks you didn't even know you were wearing. That kind of pain isn't ordinary. It's alchemical, and only souls with a divine mission are entrusted with it. Ask yourself, when you were at your lowest, did something inside you refuse to give up? That voice, that spark, that tiny whisper that said, keep going, even when nothing made sense. That was your divinity speaking. That was your first round status activating. Because chosen ones are born with a resilience that doesn't come from the mind, it comes from the soul. It's ancient, it's encoded, it doesn't need evidence, it moves on faith. You may have questioned your worth 1,000,000 times. You may have begged the sky for answers. You may have screamed into the void, asking why life had to be so hard. And still, you're here, still breathing, still seeking, still listening to this message. That right there is not ordinary. That is a spiritual signature. That is the mark of someone who was never meant to be average. Because let's be honest, average would have broken you a long time ago. But you weren't built to break. You were built to transform. And now, bit by bit, the pieces are coming together. You're starting to see that the pain wasn't the end, it was the beginning. The beginning of your awakening. The beginning of your purpose. The beginning of your return to yourself. You're realizing that the very things that made you feel cursed were actually signs that you were being crafted. Not for a platform, but for a purpose. Not for attention, but for alignment. And that's why, when you finally step into your power, people won't understand it. They'll say, where did they come from? But the truth is, you didn't come out of nowhere. You came out of everywhere, every wound, every shadow, every night you thought would swallow you whole. You emerged not because you were lucky, but because your soul remembered its assignment. So now I ask you, can you look at your past differently? Can you hold your pain like a sacred scroll written in a language only the awakened can read? Can you finally see that your struggles weren't signs of being lost, but signs of being called? Because when you do, everything changes. Your scars become your scripture. Your past becomes your platform. And your pain becomes the proof that yes, you were always a first-round divine pick. Divine frequency, why you've always been tuned to a higher calling. There's something you've probably noticed but maybe never fully understood. You've always felt different. Not in a way that made you feel superior, but in a way that felt almost alien. You look around and wonder why no one sees what you see, why people seem so comfortable living lives that feel hollow to you. You've tried to fit in, tried to silence the divine static in your chest, but it never really worked. No matter how many masks you wore, no matter how many scripts you tried to follow, something inside you kept humming like a sacred radio tuned to another station. That hum, that's your divine frequency. And it's the third undeniable sign that you're a first-round divine pick. Chosen ones carry an energetic blueprint that separates them from the collective programming. You can't explain why you feel things before they happen, or why certain people drain you just by standing near you. You can't tell anyone why a room suddenly feels heavy, or why a stranger's eyes make you weep. But you feel it. You've always felt it. That's because your frequency is tuned to something higher, something ancient, holy, and unshackably real. You're not just living in this world, you're reading it, decoding it, translating what others can't even sense. This heightened sensitivity isn't a weakness. It's a sacred technology. It allows you to pick up on spiritual signals that guide your every step. That gut feeling you get when something's off, that's your divine GPS. That sudden knowing about a person before they speak, that's your soul recognizing energy before form. And that deep, inexplicable pull towards certain people, places, or ideas, that's your calling whispering through the walls of reality. The problem is, most people don't understand this. They chalk it up to being too emotional, too intense, or too much. But you're not too much, you're just too real for a world addicted to the fake. You've been forced to question your own sanity because the world tried to convince you that your gifts were burdens, that your depth was a flaw, that your honesty was an inconvenience. But what if the exact things that made you feel out of place were the very things proving you never were from this place to begin with? You weren't meant to blend in. You were meant to broadcast a different kind of truth. That's why your presence shifts rooms. That's why people confess things to you they've never told anyone. That's why you often feel exhausted after being around large crowds, because your energy field isn't just open, it's porous. You're absorbing, translating, healing, and transmitting energy constantly. It's spiritual labor. It's sacred work. And it's time you honored that. But here's where it gets deeper. Your frequency isn't just sensitive, it's activating. When you speak from your soul, people wake up. When you create from your alignment, people remember who they are. You don't just inspire others, you ignite them. That's why your voice matters. That's why your truth is heavy. Because it's not coming from your personality, it's coming from your essence. And that essence is encoded with something only you can offer. Ask yourself this: has your truth ever made people uncomfortable, not because it was wrong, but because it was too real? That's not a coincidence. That's your frequency doing what it was designed to do: disrupt illusions, shake the sleepers, stir the stagnant waters. You were born not to maintain systems, but to dismantle them by being the living contradiction to everything false. And don't be surprised if your path looks chaotic. When you're tuned to a higher frequency, you won't be able to follow the traditional timeline. Relationships may fall away. Careers may collapse. Identities may dissolve. That's because your soul refuses to be boxed in by structures that were never built to hold your light. You're not here to build a life that looks good. You're here to live a life that feels true. And sometimes that means walking away from everything the world says is success. But the moment you stop resisting your frequency and start honoring it, everything starts to align. You find people who speak your language without words. You stumble into synchronicities that feel like divine winks. You start to feel safe in your own energy. And eventually you stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start declaring, "This is what's right with me." So let me ask you something that could change your entire perspective. What if your weirdness, your wildness, your too-muteness was actually your wavelength? What if you've always been broadcasting truth and the world just wasn't ready to hear it until now? Because the era of the chosen ones has arrived. The world is shifting. The illusions are crumbling. And your frequency is no longer a liability, it's your leadership. You were never meant to be understood by everyone. You were meant to remind the few and awaken the many. The soul assignment, living what you were born to embody. Now we've arrived at the heart of it all, the moment where realization meets responsibility. Because once you know you're a first-round divine pick, you can't unknow it. Once the veil is lifted and you see the blueprint of your soul, the question is no longer, am I chosen? The question becomes, what will I do with what I've been given? This is where the real journey begins, not in the recognition, but in the embodiment. Being chosen doesn't mean you get to sit on a throne. It means you're called to build it from the ground up with your bare hands. It means being the first to break generational curses, to walk away from toxic cycles, to stand in truth when it costs you everything. It means knowing that your life isn't just yours, it's a vessel for something eternal to move through. And that's not a burden. It's an honor, one that very few are ready for, and even fewer are willing to carry. You've probably already felt the weight of that responsibility. The way others look to you for answers, for healing, for hope. The way your words land harder, your silence cuts deeper, your decisions ripple wider. That's because you're no longer just living for yourself. You've become a frequency, an embodied reminder to others of what's possible when you remember who you are. And that's powerful beyond words. But here's the truth: walking this path is not about being perfect. It's about being authentic. You're not here to perform spirituality. You're here to live it in real time through heartbreak, through uncertainty, through the rawness of everyday life. The real chosen ones don't just talk about light, they've walked through the dark. They don't preach love, they become it. They don't avoid the fire, they let it refine them. This is why your mess matters. Your healing journey, your battles with doubt, your late nights questioning everything, it's all sacred. Nothing is wasted when you're chosen. Every scar becomes scripture. Every detour becomes direction. Every breakdown becomes the birthplace of breakthrough. That's what makes you relatable. Not your polish, but your process. People don't need more gurus, they need more real ones. People who are honest about the climb, the cost, and the scars they carry with pride. So what do you do now? You live it. You stop hiding. You stop shrinking. You stop pretending you don't feel what you feel or know what you know. You stop waiting for permission and start giving yourself the authority to move, to speak, to create, to serve. Because that's the final mark of a true chosen one. They don't live for applause, they live for impact. Ask yourself one last, soul deep question. If you knew without a doubt that you were sent here for something sacred, how would you live differently starting today? Would you still silence your truth? Would you still postpone your calling? Would you still let fear run the show? Or would you rise not because you're ready, but because it's time? Because it is. The time is now. The world is being recalibrated. Truth is rising. Illusions are falling. And the divine is calling its first round picks to step forward not as saviors, but as reminders. Reminders of what's real. Reminders of what's possible. Reminders of how it feels to walk in alignment with your soul. You were not chosen to escape the world. You were chosen to transform it by being the living, breathing, undeniable proof that light still exists and always will. You are not becoming the chosen one. You are the chosen one. And now you embody it.